welcome to the world of 21 Futures, Tales from the Timechain. This book, forthcoming in December 2023 with Consensus Network, is the world's very first Bitcoin fiction anthology. I'm the editor, Philip Charter, and today we speak with one of the authors featured in the anthology, TechnologieKultur. That's
Hey,
a bit of a
everyone.
mouthful, TechnologieKultur.
Well,
welcome to the show anyway.
Yes, thanks for having me. That's a thing we Germans do. We can make arbitrarily long words if we want to, and we very often want to.
Yeah, I love a bit of language chat. We've got a lot of authors in this anthology from all around the world, and it's great to have Germany represented and a German language speaker. Brilliant. Well, we're going to hear a bit of TechnologieKultur's story transit later in the show. And for that, let's ask a few questions to see how we got here and discuss the story and all things writing. So tell us, how did you get involved in the project?
So, besides of being a Bitcoiner, which is like the prerequisite for all of this, I suppose, I have been into science fiction my entire life. So it was the first genre I fell in love with, and I have stuck to it for decades. So that has always been on my horizon. And when I saw this super interesting article of Dhruv Bansal about Bitcoin astronomy, it sparked another interest of mine. I'm not really a good physics guy, but I'm interested in hard science fiction and social science fiction. So the underlying math and the principles are really interesting to me. And so when Dhruv in his article also mentioned that he would love people to pick this up and fictionalize it, automatically my gears began to churn, and I started on a long walk through the woods to discuss this article and all the social technical ramifications on a long walk through the woods with my wife.
Just to jump in, sorry, what was the premise of the article? What's the the theory behind the article?
I think he introduced in this article the concept of a hash horizon. So because you have signal delay, basically based on the speed of light, which you can transmit the signals. And this is the underlying premise. And he really spins this whole argument. And the article actually comes in more than one part. But I really caught on to the first part, which basically extends from Earth outwards until Mars. He later on extrapolates it even further. And I think there's even a comic that has been produced that picks up on the more intergalactic idea of this whole article. But I basically stick to the first section with what happens between Earth and Mars after we successfully colonize Mars. So that's basically the underpinning at where I started to think about things. Obviously, very quickly you get into the people that live there, that have to make do, and what their relationship to Earth might be. Have they come from there? Have they been born on Mars? All these kinds of things.
That's really interesting, and we've got a lot of sci-fi space adventures and so many questions that these stories are unlocking. Yours too. I'd like to pick up on what you said about Bitcoin being a Bitcoiner, that was very poorly phrased, sorry, about how being a Bitcoiner is a prerequisite for taking part in this anthology. I'm not sure that's true. Many of our authors, of course, are knowledgeable about Bitcoin, have been involved with it. Some of them, at least one, don't know so much about Bitcoin. They just wanted to take part and sort of write a relevant story. And I think that's the idea behind this anthology, is that, yes, we really hope the community picks up on it and enjoys the stories. And of course, they will make up the most interested parties. Really, these are just stories, right? And I really hope that you can share the book and your story with anyone around you that knows you and say, hey, I read a story, do you want to read it? And that's the secret device to orange pilling people.
I surely agree that it should be an access point for people that are not yet knee deep into it. I just phrased it that way because it was part of the task as it was set up. That so basically the technical aspect of Bitcoin, if they show up, they should be correct. So obviously it helps if you have spent some time studying the protocol and what it all means. But obviously you can look at this stuff from a higher level and really just look at these more basic and more generally known concepts as sound money and basically what a store of value is and all these things. For that, you don't have to be a Bitcoiner, but I think it obviously helps to, how would you say, to weave it in if you have a basic understanding of how it works. And actually, since I based my story on this article, the whole premise is that Bitcoin exists, that people are using it on a daily basis, basically constantly, and that it has physical limitations to it. So I consider the thing that I wrote hard as F. So physics definitely is one of the characters in the story.
Yeah, great. I liked your explanation there, and I think, I agree. Obviously, it's if you do have a deep understanding of it, or at least a basic understanding, it helps fire all of these questions which lie at the heart of the stories. And what we wanted and that we got, from most of these stories is that first and foremost, it's just a great piece of fiction, and the relevance of Bitcoin is there, but it's not totally about just pushing Bitcoin. That's what the idea was, I suppose. But I liked your explanation on that. What other, you mentioned this article about Bitcoin sort of astronomy and hash horizons. What other stories or artwork are inspiring you in the Bitcoin space?
Obviously, there are interesting pieces of art that a whole lot of different people have produced with centering around or centered on Bitcoin. And even though I like the visual arts, I'm more into stories, text. I'm a kind of word guy. So I'm really interested in all these different articles. They don't have to be fiction. They can, but they don't have to be. All these different Bitcoin perspectives, how because it has so many entrances to the rabbit hole or exits from the rabbit hole, rather, you have so many different perspectives. One good example is also Thomas Strollite, because he just takes this an unusual perspective on so many things. He basically walks around Bitcoin and looks at it from different perspectives. He's not the only one, but he's a good example of a very varied approach to that. And that's also something I like. I like to look at these parts of Bitcoin that are not explored for the 15th and 20th time. So I consider that a form of art already. But if we really want to talk about art and visual things, I have to say that besides the memes, obviously, even more condensed form of meme to me is all the profile pictures and the avatars that people use on social media. Because for me, a pivotal moment to really get into Bitcoin culture was when everybody was putting on their laser eyes. That to me was like, that was a call. I still wear the laser eyes, and because we're not yet at 100K, so that's non-negotiable at this point.
Is that when the lasers stop? When we hit 100K,
that's when the laser eyes
all the lasers turn off.
Can get off. Then we need something even more outrageous, I think.
I definitely
we'll
think
come up with something.
That's the sign of if you identify as a Bitcoiner. Well, do you have lasers or not? If you do, then there's no doubting it, right?
Yeah. And do you put on lasers because it's en vogue, or do you put on lasers because we haven't reached 100K yet? That's basically the big question. But there's so many more little details about it, like people putting on their McDonald's caps. You really have to be into Bitcoin culture to really understand why it is a thing to actually wear a McDonald's hat when the price goes down like on the roller coaster. So
Mhm.
because all these memes, they already work like as an ensemble by now. And that's what I consider then a real expression of culture, technology
Yeah,
culture,
the
basically.
technology culture, there we go. That's where the name comes from. Yeah, I think it's really interesting how the concept of art and creativity is rapidly changing because of social media and digital, like, capabilities, and you're totally right. I mean, even a profile picture has so many deep levels of meaning. If you think back 1 century or even 50 years ago, I mean, the very thought of having a sort of complex avatar system to represent many things about you and about Bitcoin or whatever would be just unthinkable. And, further to that and the memes and the videos and stuff, there's a lot of creativity going on with, sound, with visual art, even with in a physical space of like physical art, and just how it's starting to creep, I think, into public consciousness. So I think that's cool.
There's actually a very healthy cultural life around Bitcoin, also specifically in Germany. Or it started with, basically with a podcast. It's called 21, the German word for 21.
Mhm.
And they have built a really good ecosystem where people meet in meet space in real life. But there's also a lot of music being produced around it. They have a lot of people contributing in like an open source fashion
Mhm.
and pro- providing extra videos. And as I said, there's a lot of good music being produced that's really enjoyable and can be a new entry point for some people maybe. So I
Yeah,
also consider that very important part of art.
that's interesting. I have a German friend who is a um, techno fan and owns some Bitcoin, I think. So I'll have to tell him about that podcast and see if he
But
knows it.
I think predominantly it would be like more in the rap hip hop kind of sphere, but there's more than that. It
All
goes
right.
beyond that.
Interesting. Let's turn our attention to your story, transit, and your invention of Graviball, a new sport. Tell us about that. What inspired you to create this sport?
Hmm. So very importantly, I have no interest whatsoever in the sports ball. None of it. I'm pretty much averse to like these ball-based team sports. However, I recognize the absolute importance when it comes to forming identity and how it mobilizes people and how it really creates a sense of community. And of course, I don't want to take away of the athletic excellence of people. So it's a worthwhile endeavor to really get good at something. So I really recognize and appreciate that. I just don't like to watch it a lot. But
Sure.
the idea of gravity ball in and of itself is also more or less or mostly based on physics, because I've been thinking a lot when I thought about the spaceship. I had to think about physics, about artificial gravity, all these kind of things. And when you travel through space, you have muscle atrophy,
Hmm.
and you have to do something about it. So what do? You work with artificial gravity. But if people have to spend hours every day on like sort of a treadmill or some contraption, why not make this fun? So I thought, how would people take like physical exercise that they have to do to keep their muscles in good shape while they're space traveling or work in a low gravity environment like Mars? What do? Yeah, they like do this workout and throw balls back and forth or whatever. And out of that, you basically make a sport. And so, and then I
Yeah, makes
basically
sense.
had a player of that sport naturally arise as a character in the story.
Yeah, it totally makes sense with the sort of interaction between these new modes of living in space and our physical bodies, and sort of
Mm.
staying connected to that. Again, that's been a theme in quite a few of the stories, and something we're
Mm.
grappling with at the moment, isn't it? The our physical bodies, our biological selves.
Yeah. Bitcoin is so deeply anchored in physical and objective reality. So once you really get into the topic, you just can't ignore the obvious like obstacles and advantages and all that it brings.
Yeah, and tell us a little bit more about the world in which transit is set. So you said there's a colonization of Mars and a many
Mhm.
people living in space.
The world itself, it's um, pretty much a near future setup. We're only looking a couple of decades ahead from where we are now. And it's an extrapolation of what we are seeing now. At least that's what I'm trying to do. And in my head, and I hope also on the page, it works on various different levels because Mars is colonized in a couple of different spots. You basically have like separate cities there that are
Hmm.
all based on a little bit different demographic and cultural setup. And one of the levels I tried to put this together on was like a geographic distribution of of Earth as we know it right now, like the different continents or bigger cultural units are represented there through their cities. But I also try to put a couple of meta levels on top of that. So where you have different aspects that basically flow together to create intentional communities, which is also like a buzzword in this whole free city movement kind of thing. So trying to really put a couple of different meta levels on top of that, because I like to stack meanings and I like to stack concepts on top of each other. I really try to work out a couple of these different aspects that will unify people. So, for example, this whole open source movement that in my story I loosely associated with the global South that we are seeing, like probably on a sharp rise, I would say, over the next couple of decades, specifically
Hmm.
because of open source technology and like flattening of global hierarchies. Probably,
Got it.
possibly.
Okay. All sounds fascinating. I also wanted to ask about the ship where the majority of the story takes place, and the ship has different levels of Sats flow. Could you explain what that means in
Mm.
the context of the story, and what does it relate to in our world, if
Mm.
anything?
Yeah, it is based on the same ideas and principle as the geographic distribution or the geographic and cultural origin of the different cities on Mars.
Hmm.
Also, just like working as a type for something, but basically the ship as a whole, you can look at it as like an upper middle and lower class society if you want to. That's like the most blatant and obvious thing. I hope that there are a little bit more subtle aspects to it as well, but that's for the
Yeah.
reader to judge then. But yeah, basically, um, if money and capital and resources are not an issue, life has no very mm, very precise or very closely calculated price. Everything basically just is built on a foundation of unlimited resources. And that's
Mhm.
reflected in the story where there's space inside, where in a spaceship, that's usually a very scarce resource. And because in my story, Bitcoin is a thing and all the benefits that it brings are also there, there is an actually existing middle class that can reap the rewards of their labor, which one of the characters is able to do. And this is just mentioned in like half a sentence, but basically expresses that somebody worked hard for many years and then he can afford certain comforts that other people that really don't have these kind of resources or because they are punished or whatever, they have to travel in circumstances that are really, yeah, not desirable for the average person, let's say. And that's basically a reflection of that. it's still, I think, for everybody traveling on this transit ship, it's a very expensive journey. It's just it the way it touches them personally.
Sure. Imagine that, working hard and then reaping the rewards. That's the future we have to look forward to. Great. Well, yeah, perhaps you can read a bit from Transit and
I can.
share an excerpt with everybody.
Yeah. Just let me quickly switch my screen. So here we are. So from the story titled Transit, I'm reading an excerpt from the section Medium Sets Flow Level. Sweat. Victor Adler, Area 00187, knew that thousands of spectators spread all over Mars, and probably even a few areophilic Earthlings with a few minutes of signal delay, would be watching the game. Images from La Esperanza's rotating gravidrome streamed every conceivable viewing perspective onto the screens of Graviball fans who were eager to see if his Areopolis spear tips would wrest the title from the Enrobinados and their rusty brown overalls. Torn between gravity and centrifugal force, Victor propped his hands on his knees and took deep breaths. Sweat trickled down through his grey coveralls. The Areopolis spear tips had just scored a spectacular goal, and he imagined for a moment how the sets flow of the enthusiastic spectators streamed back to the operators of the gravidrome and, of course, to him and his teammates. He was unaware of his maximally inconvenient position in front of the muzzle from which a new ball would be shot. All he heard was a resounding "fup" as it went off, pulling his leg out from under him so fast that he slammed backwards onto the playing surface with the back of his head. A bright flash split his head, and his ears rang with thunder. He jolted up and found himself in the tangle of cables and hoses of his transit booth.
Wonderful. That was a very nice dropping us right into that action there of a Graviball game. It sounds quite exciting. I have to say, I recently went to watch my first ever basketball game, and it was cool enough. And I'd probably prefer to watch Graviball though.
Yeah, I have sketches of like what the gravidrome looks like and about the physics, what the dimensions would be. But yeah, of course, in a short story like that, there's no way to explore all these aspects of it. But for people who maybe also are into old school sci-fi and these kind of things, maybe some people have seen the Rollerball movie. It's from the 70s or something like that.
Yep.
It's not that, but there's a little bit of an inspiration for that because it all goes in circles like everything in physics.
And everything in sci-fi. I love
yeah.
how sci-fi always refers backwards as well as
Yes,
forwards,
yes.
because you take inspiration from previous sci-fi, which has now been out futured, like Space Odyssey or something. Well, we're past 2001.
Exactly. Space Odyssey actually also played into the writing of this story, just from a physics point of view. Yes.
Great. Where can people find you online, Technology Culture? And do you have any more writing projects coming up?
So, a couple of my articles that are not fiction, but I hope still like engaging reads at least, can be found on the webpage of Coinbeast, which is also like a Bitcoin outlet. So I have a couple of articles on there. And I do have my own homepage as well, which right now is underdeveloped, I would say. And I hope to be able to spend more time on it. But it is easy to find. It is TechnologieKultur.info. And I hope to put a couple of things there as soon as possible. But right now, I do have a couple of open writing projects. Not all of it like Bitcoin related, but some there is some fiction, but there's also some considerations. Also, I would say an underexplored angle of Bitcoin that I don't want to get into too much right now because I don't want to overpromise and underdeliver, rather the other way around. So
All
I'm
right.
working on something, and hope to pull it off soon.
Sounds exciting. Well, visit technologyculture.info if you want to check out all of that stuff. Great. Thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your story with everyone. Good luck with your future semi-secret Bitcoin endeavors. And I really look forward to holding a copy of the book with your story in my hands in December when it launches.
Thank you so much for having me, and thanks for this awesome opportunity.
Great. See you then. Thanks.
Yes, thank you. Bye.